This Week in the Boardroom, brought to you by Corporate Board Member and host NYSE Euronext, along with Governance Knowledge Partner Paul Weiss and contributing partners National Investor Relations Institute and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.
Welcome to this edition of This Week in the Boardroom. I'm TK Kerstetter with Corporate Board Member, and I'm joined by my co-host again this week, Scott Cutler with the NYSE Euronext. And we have a great topic today because we're going to talk about the mandatory audit firm rotation. And this has been a bubbling up topic. And again, we're lucky to have a guest that sort of is the expert in this area. Please welcome Cindy Fornelli, who's the Executive Director for the Center for Audit Quality, sometimes referred to as CAQ. Cindy, welcome.
Thank you.
And as I said, this is a topic that's certainly being thrown around. It may not be on the tip of directors' tongues, but it has an effect on directors that I think is important. But first of all, I thought it would be good just so that our audience can be aware of exactly what is the Center for Audit Quality and what's its mission.
Certainly. And thanks for being here. It's a pleasure. The CAQ is a public policy organization based in Washington, D.C. And our mission is quite simple. It's to foster confidence, investor confidence in our capital markets by looking at issues around public company auditing.
Well, there might be some people in our audience that aren't aware of this audit firm mandatory rotation, recommendation that's coming out. Describe what it is and where it's coming from, and just so that we start from a good foundation.
Well, the Public Company Auditing Board, the PCAOB, is the overseer of public company auditing. And they, in the fall, asked the question as to how auditors can increase their independence, objectivity, and skepticism, which are three foundations of quality audits. And they put out for comment a concept release, what they call in their vernacular a concept release, asking the public to weigh in on independence, objectivity, and skepticism, particularly whether or not mandatory audit firm rotation would help increase independence, objectivity, and skepticism. Recall that Sarbanes-Oxley required that the audit partner rotate every 5 years. This would go beyond that and require the audit firm to rotate after a certain period of years.
So what's the Center's view?
Well, the Center for Audit Quality is on the record as being opposed to mandatory audit firm rotation because we feel, like many others do, that there are already good checks and balances built into the system post-Sarbanes-Oxley to mitigate the issue or pay model. At heart of all of these issues is the inherent potential conflict of interest that can arise when the company pays the auditor for the audit work. But of course, Sarbanes-Oxley gave us a host of checks and balances or mitigators to that potential conflict of interest. The PCAOB has not shown that there is a nexus between audit firm tenure and a loss of objectivity, skepticism, and independence. And we also have not found any kind of nexus to that. So while we think independence, objectivity, skepticism, very important, and we all need to partner together to find ways to ever increase that, we don't think mandatory firm rotation is the way to accomplish that.
It seems as though the corporate community is very much aligned with that view. Is there something we're missing? Are most boards and corporations aligned with that view?
Well, the PCAOB received an extraordinary number of comments on this concept release. They received over 600 comments from a wide range of stakeholders, including audit committees, board members, and management themselves. In fact, of the 600 plus letters, over 200 of them came from audit committee chairs or independent directors, and they unanimously opposed mandatory firm rotation. They also received over 200 letters from the corporate community, from what we call the preparer community, so CFOs, CEOs. They also unanimously opposed mandatory firm rotation. So I think that the business community as a whole sees that this is not the best way to move forward.
But there have been some institutional shareholder groups and other groups that have found it to be or support it. I mean, are you finding any groups in particular that
interestingly, the investor community, which is frequently vocal on corporate governance type issues, did not really weigh in very much on this particular issue, which is surprising to me. There were about 11 letters from investors. Now, it all depends on how you define an investor, but if they didn't declare themselves to be of a different camp and they were from a investor type, be it buy side or sell side, organization, we, in our analysis, counted them as an investor, and they were about half and half of just the 11 letters that came in. Again, compared to 200 from the corporate community, 200 from the audit committee and independent director community.
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot around this issue, and I don't know whether there's so much more to focus on as a proxy advisory group. I mean, there's so many juicier issues that maybe they have, but I haven't seen much on that. So I'm assuming that maybe they have sort of a middle of the road position on whether this makes sense or not.
I think that might be part of it, but I also think that, as I mentioned at the outset, there are checks and balances in the system, and really the key, in my mind, check and balance, or the key mitigator for these potential conflicts of interest that could be baked into the system, is the audit committee. So the audit committee does have the responsibility to oversee the audit, to hire and fire the audit, and to assess the audit on an annual basis to determine whether or not they're doing a good job and should be retained, or should the audit committee determine to go with a different auditor for a whole variety of reasons that they could do that. And so given that the audit committee, which is required by law to be comprised of independent directors, stand in the shoes for investors, perhaps investors feel as though there are other more important checks and balances that are built into the system. Not to say that we all shouldn't be partnering with the audit committee community and others to be thinking about how we all can increase independence, objectivity, and skepticism, which I think is a common goal that we all share.
How about what can board members do? What can our audience do to get engaged? I mean, to participate in this?
Well, the PCAOB has reopened the comment letter period. So they, until April 22nd, any interested party can write in. You would go to the PCAOB's website, which is pcaob.org, and look for docket number 37. And you can write a letter. Again, it need not be from an audit committee member. Any interested person can do so, but I would encourage audit committee members to weigh in, because this will have a direct impact on how audit committees fulfill their obligations if this were to go into effect. And so you can look at what other people have said. Last week, the PCAOB held 2 days of roundtables where they had over 45 representatives of various stakeholders appear and speak about this issue. So on the PCAOB's website, you can go and find transcripts and actually the video of that. And so you can search by whatever stakeholder group you want, or if you know somebody that you would like to see what his or her position is, you can do that. So I would encourage everybody to be involved. And as you know, the CAQ is working closely with the audit committee community to find ways that the audit committees can do a better job of fulfilling their obligation in assessing the auditor. I think auditors need to do a better job of communicating with audit committees about areas of particular interest around the financial statements, be it critical accounting estimates, significant or unusual transactions, going concerns considerations. So independence, objectivity, and skepticism are the types of behaviors that can ever be improved, right? They're never perfect. There's always continuous improvement. So it behooves us all to partner together to find ways to raise the game, if you will, in that area.
So where would our audience go to get more information about the center and the kinds of programs and training that you offer?
Well, thank you for that. You can go to our website, which is the CAQ, so THECAQ.org. And we have all kinds of information. We have information about anti-fraud, educational materials, and a lot of information, of course, about the mandatory firm rotation proposal and what we think other ways to address independence, objectivity, and skepticism are out there and should be focused on.
Well, Cindy, thanks for joining us, and Scott and I will do our best to roust out the troops and get people to respond, because the responding does make a difference. If
it
you
really
get
does.
a flood of letters about people, I think it really has an influence on somebody like the PCAOB. So with that out there, did you hear that? You need to make sure that you take advantage, go on to their website, make sure that you respond. I think it will be helpful. This issue is important, and it sounds like the corporate boards want to get behind the center's movement to oppose this mandatory rotation. So I'm sure it'll be interesting to hear, and we'll try and remember to report back what's happened. And again, Cindy, thanks for joining us. And that will conclude this week's edition of This Week in the Boardroom. We hope that you'll join us next week when we have the chance to take a look at another topic that will help you be a better board member or a better committee member. And thanks for joining us.
Join us again next week for This Week in the Boardroom, brought to you by corporate board member and host NYSE Euronext, along with governance knowledge partner Paul Weiss and contributing partners National Investor Relations Institute and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.